What's going on, everybody? My name's Thaddeus McNeil with the Mission to Message Academy. I teach people how to tell their stories so they can change lives. I'll also show you how to turn your story into an asset that sells, because I believe that your story is the foundation that everything gets built upon. And so, guys, we're going to talk about how the story that you've been through, or the story of what you endured, story of what you learned, the story of your life, or some particular story within your life, those life experiences become the foundation on which you build everything on. We're going to explore that today. We're going to talk about how God turns your life, the good, the bad, the ugly, into the blueprint for everything. And it's what everything gets built upon. And though you may not have wished it's happened to you, though you thought it may have been distasteful at the time, we're going to talk about how it's a benefit to you and how God uses that to build your business. All right. So look, let's jump right into it, guys. I'm not going to take too much longer. All right. So let's bring this on in. So like I said, this is your story is the foundation, how God builds through your good, bad, and ugly into everything that gets built. So, all right, guys, let's jump into it. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the things we're going to cover tonight. We're going to talk about the foundation principle, why your story isn't behind you. It's everything that gets built upon. All right. We're going to talk about the biblical pattern, how Joseph, Job, and Paul allow God to use his plan to position them for purpose. We're going to talk about the science behind this. What's the reason that you identify with certain things and how there's growth that can come through your adversity? We're going to talk about how your gifts make room for you. We're going to stay in Psalms 18:16, and we're going to talk about how that works. We're going to talk about using the good, the bad, and ugly as the raw materials to build your business. Then we're going to talk about the next steps after that. So, all right, let's jump right into it, guys. All right. So look, session one, the foundation principle. Your story isn't behind you, it's what everything else gets built upon. Many times we go through stuff that's really tough and that we would not have chosen for ourselves, but we don't realize that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and called according to his purpose. If that is the case, oftentimes you don't see the thing that you've been through as a gift, but it can be. And we're going to talk about how you turn that into a gift. And we're going to talk about how you use those things as your foundation. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. All right. You can't see a foundation. Here's the builder's truth. You can't see a foundation, but everything stands on it. We understand how a house works. And one of the first things that has to be done is the laying of the foundation. And we understand that getting that foundation right is everything that needs to happen when it comes to the house building correctly, right? Here's the thing. It's hidden, but it's not absent. The foundation is a part that nobody sees, but it's a part holding the most weight. Your story is going to do the same thing, guys. So as we start exploring this, here's a couple of things I want you to think about. I want you to think about the moment that most impacted your life. I want you to think about the things that gave your life the most meaning. I want you to think about the things that pivoted your life, that changed the day, or a day came when you changed how you saw life. I want you to think about how you had a moment or something that you lived through that really reconstructed the way you think. All right. So those are some of the things I want you to be thinking about while we're talking about this. It determines what you can build. All right. A shaky foundation limits how high you can go. All right. A strong, examined story can hold your calling, your business, and your momentum, your movement. All right. So here's the thing. Most of us started a business. We received our calling, or we got to be a part of a movement, whether it's nonprofit organization or for-profit organization or any of these things, because something happened somewhere in our lives. That something that happened somewhere in our lives became now what drove us into what we do now. So it starts as a story, which becomes the foundation, right? So it was poor before the structure even existed. More oftentimes than not, you weren't looking for that story. You weren't looking for that thing to happen to you, but it came your way. God was laying a foundation in a season you didn't understand yet. This could have happened to you when you were younger, long before you had any type of platform, business, or message. These things get laid before you. I'll give you an example of myself. So some years ago, I grew up with a single parent. And one of the stories I tell, because I'm a professional speaker, is the time my mother, when I was, I think, 18 years old, my mom, well, actually before then, when she was 18 years old, my mom was 20 years old when she had me. And so There's a story that I tell on stage about how she walked from being a store cashier to being the manager of a store to being district manager to being partnered with a company, and how all of that changed her life. So that started before I even understood what was going on, but it's a story that's a part of my life that I get a chance to share. When I wasn't thinking about it, I also shared a story that I had no idea I was going to be able to build a platform on. I had a time where I lost my mother. I'm sorry, I lost my father, my oldest daughter, and my mother in a 6-month span while going through a horrific divorce. Now, I tell that story as well as part of mental health things, and I talk about different things when it comes to grief and resilience. But I didn't know I would be able to build a platform on that. Those are not things I would have chosen for myself. I was a United States Marine. Now I'm an Army officer. I did choose these things, but choosing these things gave me tons of stories. These are things that I build my platforms on. So, because of that, I'm telling you, you can do the same thing, whether it's a movement, whether you've endured something. I have a good friend. As a matter of fact, she just launched a business. She lost a child during birth. And so now she has an organization that helps mothers when they lose children during birth. It's a whole thing, but this is her passion. This started off with her story. It became the foundation of what she built upon. This is where she found fulfillment. And I'm guessing you're going to do the same thing. Oh, going the wrong way. All right, so let's talk about some of the biblical patterns of the things you'll find within the Bible, all right? What the Bible says about what happens in our lowest moments and how God used them for assignments, all right? So let's talk about Joseph first, man. I think this is a famous story. Joseph goes into the pit, right? So we understand that Joseph's family threw him in a pit, all right? The scripture here says, you intended it for harm, but God intended it for good to save many lives. Many times we don't see the thing that happened to us in the moment as a good thing. I can't imagine what it felt like to have that level of abandonment, that level of betrayal within a family. And I can imagine that a person can focus on this part the entire time. But let's look at how the story turned out. He was sold by his brothers, falsely accused, forgotten in prison for years. But none of this was wasted. It became the exact training ground for the assignment that saved an entire nation. More oftentimes than not, you don't realize that the thing that you went through that was distasteful or painful is going to be a benefit to somebody else, especially within the painful moment. I understand, I've been there. So again, let's look at it like this. So he started off first in the pit based on the betrayal of his family. This was a major wound in his life. From there, he goes to prison. Again, this is not anything that he caused years of injustice, like where his character and gifts were refined in obscurity, things he didn't choose that shaped him and framed him into the person that will be able to save an entire nation. Then he gets all the way to the palace. This very pain became the platform. Joseph's story became Egypt's salvation strategy. So again, you may not see it in the moment, but oftentimes you're going through something and your pain. I want you to know that God does not just throw away your pain. There's a purpose for it. All things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. Your pain has purpose. And these aren't the only stories. It's just some we're going to talk about tonight. I keep going the wrong direction. Let's talk about Job. When becomes your testimony. Oh my gosh. And everybody knows the story of Job, how he lost everything, right? In this scripture, the Lord restored Job's losses and gave him twice as much as he had before. Job lost everything: health, wealth, children, reputation. He didn't get a TED talk about resilience. He got restored. He got an expanded life and a story that comforted suffering people for thousands of years. Here's the takeaway. All right. Your hardest season is still part of your testimony, even while you're still in it. All right. I understand, but it's a part of your testimony. So with that, what I'm essentially also saying is please do not give up. Don't give up, and let's change or reframe how we see that. Restoration doesn't ease the story. It becomes a part of it. Okay. Because there's still that painful beginning, maybe even middle, all the way up to the end. But there's a change that comes that has an effect that's a blessing, not just maybe for you or for someone else. Job's account isn't Job's account is still being read today because he was honest about the pain, not just the comeback. So we could have talked about this only from the standpoint of how Joseph experienced a turnaround in his life. We had to spend so much time being steeped into the pain that Joseph went through. So we will understand how sweet the turnaround was. I'll give you an example. Some years ago, I went through one of the most painful, ugly divorces that you can imagine. And I was like, man, I won't wish this on nobody. I wouldn't opt out. I would never like put myself through this again. This was the worst situation. When I left, a couple things I thought, because I had stepkids from that situation. With the stepkids, I said, because I was older when I got divorced. I was like 38 when I got 30, yeah, 38 when I got divorced. Was like, I'm probably not going to get married again. And I don't know why I was telling myself stuff like this. It was like so bitter from that nasty taste of the divorce that I was like, hey, this is not something I want to do again. And I didn't have any biological children. I was like, man, I might be a little too old to want to start over. So with that said, not too long after I started with the divorce was like, all right, we're done. And so once I was done, guess what I ended up doing? I came into one of the most beautiful, amazing, magnificent women in the world. Now you got to understand, like I've been out the dating game for a while. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. And she ended up saying something to me. We kicked it off. We became friends. We were friends before we started dating. We was friends for months. And then once we started dating, like everything went so smooth. And before you knew it, I asked her to marry me. She said a yes. We had an amazingly beautiful wedding. We ended up having our first child about 2 months ago. So with that said, I want to remind you, like there was pain up front, but the pain is the part that connects with people. The pain of the part is the part that identifies with people. And the pain is a part where somebody is in this particular moment. Your job is to help them get to the other side by just sharing your story. The Bible says we're overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. That word testimony is the word witness. You witness a painful part of your past. And now that you've witnessed that, you also witness the restoration. You get to share with somebody the pain and how you witness the overcoming of it, which gives them strength to go from where they are in a painful place to have hope to get to a better place. All right. So I hope that made sense to everybody. But this is what you can do. Let's talk about Paul. Paul was an entire persecutor. He was killing people. Like Paul had a reputation for great fear. Like Paul was not to be played with. In 2 Corinthians, the scripture says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul once persecuted the church. The same man wrote roughly a third of the New Testament. His most quoted letters are the ones where he was honest about his weakness, his past, and his thorn. All right, here's the takeaway. Your past doesn't disqualify your message. As a matter of fact, sometimes it is the message. Like I've been through tough stuff, guys. I've made a ton of mistakes, especially as a leader being in the military. And I talk about those mistakes that I've made all the time, and it helps other people. Paul's credibility came from naming what he used to be, not what he was hiding from. So for myself, I recognize that Paul also talked about boasting his infirmity, especially when I'm giving a speech or I'm doing some type of workshop. I talk about the mistakes that I've made and the things that I've learned from incorrect thinking or from the lessons that I've learned, but I have to display the mistake first in order to get a person to understand that there's a better way, or talk about how I got some type of revelation and I do life differently because of the mistake I made. You can do the same thing. The thing you're most tempted to be, I'm sorry, the thing you're most tempted to leave out of your story might be the thing that makes someone else feel less alone. Now, here's the thing. More oftentimes than not, when we display ourselves before people, we want to present the most polished versions of ourselves. It's just human nature. But what we also realize is that when we have the courage to display what mistakes we made and where we fell short, when we talk to other people, now they feel like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one. Does that make sense? That they feel like they're not the only one. And the reason that's important is because when people feel isolated because they feel they're the only one, they can't get the help that they receive or that they need, or they can't get the restoration that is necessary. Okay. So, in order for a person to get the restoration that they need, what I have learned in this is that they have to feel seen. And the only way they feel seen, more oftentimes than not, is to receive the story of somebody coming through it or somebody going through the same thing. So the first thing they go is, it's not unique to me. When a person feels like it's not unique to me, they feel like, okay, if other people have overcome it, then maybe I can too, or maybe I have a shot to do this as well. So that's why it's important that you share your story, regardless of how messy, regardless of how ugly, regardless of how bad you may think it is, or how good it could be, or how funny or embarrassing. Okay. So I've got some embarrassing stories as well. Guys, I'm trying to get you to understand that it's important that you share your story. All right, let's jump back into it. All right, let's get to this next slide. All right, there's a pattern here. All right, between Joseph, Job, and Paul. First, betrayal and prison to saving a nation. Okay, from total loss to restoration and legacy. From persecutor to apostle and author. Failure, something negative happened. It took a while for all of it. None of this stuff was overnight. It took a while. But the same pattern, different names. The womb became the witness, and the witness became the work. I'm going to say that again. The womb became the witness, and the witness became the work. Telling you guys, like, don't think that you went through what you went through for nothing. There was a reason. That's because your story or the foundation of your business becomes your work. All right. Your story becomes that work. The thing that, that God didn't allow you to go through what you went through. Think about how many great organizations have been started from pain. Let's think about the pink ribbons. All right. That's for cancer, right? That was somebody else surviving cancer, or the United Way or something like that. Or we talk about different organizations that you see throughout the world based on the pain of somebody else. That was a TV show, America's Most Wanted. The host of that TV show lost their child. I think that child was kidnapped, and they turned around and started a show that brought to attention people who were wanted to get these people caught. And a lot of people were caught because of that show. Out of pain, bared something that helped people. So I'm telling you, you have a foundation too. It's just probably hidden under a painful story. Now, here's the science behind it. This isn't just inspiration. Research shows what the scripture says. All right. Like all of it goes together. Let's talk about it. So there's a narrative identity. In narrative identity, you become the story you tell about yourself. Psychologists like Dan McAdams describes the narrative identity as the internalizing story we construct from our experiences that make sense of who we are. All right. In other words, here's what I've learned as a person that tells stories. All right. Your story, whenever you hear information, especially when it pertains to you, your story your mind already has a story in place that it now loops into that, or it tells a different story based on how you see the information. Now, if a person is telling the information, if a person is telling you a compelling story, what you now do is take that information and you sync brainwave patterns with that person. When your brainwave patterns sync together, that person is talking where you are having a lived experience while somebody else is telling the story. You start to bring in past experiences that make you feel like what this person is saying within that story, and the story now locks in the information. It's why stories are more memorable than information alone. So, with that said, how you frame your past directly shapes your sense of purpose, mental health, and motivation in the present. So I'm going through one more thing at the end of this slide. I want to share something with you that I've been working on recently. Two people can have the same hard event happen to them. One frame it as proof that they are broken. And this is kind of proving what I was saying earlier. The other one frames it as proof that I have survived something and can leave. Wait, proof that I can survive and leave. Same facts, different foundation. The framing is the foundation. The way you tell your story determines what you can build on top of it. So here's the thing. There's some people who tell their story or have a story or go through something painful, like they just said, right? And that person will never get past it because of what they're telling themselves. Okay. There's somebody else who will reframe it. There's a couple examples in my life. I had a situation where I went to a military school when I was in the Marine Corps. And I think you had to have an 80 to pass the course. And I get a 69. I had to go back through that course. And it sucked. And I didn't like it at all. And it was very embarrassing to fail that course. Fast forward, I became a military officer. I remember thinking at the time when I was in the Marine Corps, I don't ever want to do any schools. I don't ever want to be embarrassed like that again. I don't think I'm good at school or any of those things. Fast forward, like I said, in the Army as an officer, I had to take a course. It was one of the hardest courses in the Army. I think it was hazmat transportation. I think it was less than 50% of the people that take this course failed. I was like, man, I don't want to go through this again. I studied my butt off. I worked my tail off and I passed this course. And I had one of the most prestigious certifications within the military as an officer. Now, with that said, if I'd have kept the framework of that past mistake is who I am, I might not have advanced in my career. But now that I reframed it was, well, that was this situation. I can learn from the mistakes that I made then. I can do this as well. It allowed me to grow and move forward based on the new information or the new framing of something that I went through in my past. You have the same ability to do that. Reframe your story. Okay. We're going to talk about that reframing a little bit more. Oh, going the wrong way. All right. There's post traumatic growth. Pain produces capacity. I know some of you all might not believe that, but it's the truth. Pain produces capacity. Growth after adversity. Researchers Tadashi and Calhoun, I said Tadashi, I don't know, I hope I said that right, and Calhoun coined post-traumatic growth to describe positive psychological changes that occur after struggle with highly challenging circumstances. You now become a greater person. New strength and compassion. People who grow through post traumatic growth often report a deepening sense of personal strength, closer relationships, and a greater appreciation for life, not despite the hardship, but in many ways because of how they processed it. I got a story about that as well. New possibilities. One of the documents One of the documented domains of growth is the discovery of new paths and possibilities. Survivors often pivot into work, ministry, or purpose they never would have found otherwise. Let me give you an example of the new strength and compassion. So, my wife, she's also in the military. I met her during a deployment in the military. Well, in that deployment, it was tough. It was tough. That commander was really on her, and he gave her a hard time, and he kept telling her, "Hey, I wanted better from you. I expected better from you. I don't really think you did a good job." And she was very discouraged by it. She fought through it, but she was really discouraged. Fast forward, my wife's offered company command position, and she was very nervous. I think some of those words were still lingering from this other commander. She took the risk and went after it anyway, because the way she framed what she went through initially was, I've learned some things. I don't necessarily believe in that leader, but I've learned some things, and I think I can apply what I've learned. She went on to have an amazing, amazing company command. That's 2 years of commanding about 120 people. She was responsible for millions and millions of dollars of equipment, a very strategic mission, and she accomplished it flawlessly. And she was so nervous before that. What happened was she went through something else that expanded her capacity. And because she expanded that capacity, she was able to do something that really furthered her career. As a matter of fact, she did so well that the second she came out of command, they promoted her. She hasn't even had a chance to do something different yet. So again, there's an opportunity for growth when painful things happen, okay? I want you to understand that if you can position your mind that a thing that happened to you that you may perceive initially as negative, that did not feel well, can be something that you can build upon. All right, let's move forward. All right, your story tells the brain, your story sells. Look, I'm gonna get it right. Your story sells. The brain connects through narrative. What research shows is stories activate more regions in the brain. This is what I was talking about earlier, that ties to emotion and sensory experience, which is part of your story that becomes memorable. I know it's not what it said, but it's essentially it. Um, Personal, specific stories tended to build trust and connection faster than generic claims and credentials. Here's what I mean by that. As a leader, especially you guys who are leaders, if you're talking to an organization, never lead with your credentials, never lead with your certification, never lead with your degrees, never lead with, I've got this many years of experience. Never lead with that. Always talk about the thing that you've overcome, your origin story. An example, for me, when I talk to new units, because I'm still in the military, when I talk to new units, I never talk about to the people I command or lead about my degrees or I've been to war college or any of that type of stuff. Here's what I talk about. So I was in a situation where when I was young, I was asking for direction and nobody could lead me anywhere. So I did something that was taboo and I went to a general and I asked him exactly what I needed to do to get in his position. He laughed and then he told me exactly what I needed to do. Now, those other people were upset with me because that was frowned upon. However, I had to do what I had to do because they weren't giving me the information I needed to get in his position. So when I share that origin story, oh, and I will also say part of that story is I did everything he told me to do. And now I am just a few months away from pinning lieutenant colonel. With that said, it helps the other soldiers that I lead understand I've been where they are. I understand what they need. And now it builds connection and trust with me. You need to do that. That's your origin story. So people don't remember, people don't just remember your story. They use them to decide whether or not they want to trust you, follow you, or buy from you. All right. That's the other position that you put yourself in. Use that story to get people to know, like, and trust you. Trust, follow you, and then buy from you because you guys have businesses. I had a candle business. Initially, when we just selling straight candles, it wasn't flying. But when we started telling stories about how we built this as a couple and how this candle is for couples to reconnect with, man, the thing starts popping. And so I'm telling you, everything is built upon your story. What this means for you, your story isn't extra content. It's the most effective marketing asset that you have. You have to learn to turn your story into an asset. The thing you're tempted to downplay, the messy chapters, is often the thing that builds the fastest trust. Look, all right, I'm gonna jump off to say this. I know desperately you want to hide that thing or that portion of your story that was really, really painful, that was really ugly, that made you look really bad or put a negative light on you. Don't do it. That's the part that's going to make you stand out. That's the part that's going to make you remember. When you have the courage to share those parts, this is where you really attract the right people to you and you repel all the wrong ones. You now have displayed the thing that somebody else is in the crowd or somebody else you're talking to is feeling. When you talk about that messy part, somebody's going to say, that's me. And they're going to connect with you. And for whatever reason, that's the connection that you need. Now, if you're just sharing your story to inspire somebody, this is the inspiration point. If you have a business and you're trying to attract people, this is the connection and attracting point. This is why you have to share the messiest parts of your story. If not, what you're just sharing is a little bit of struggle and tons of triumph, but it's the detail of the struggle that makes the triumph valuable. It's the detail of the struggle that makes the triumph valuable. So, guys, that's something you need to be sharing. All right, let's jump back into it. All right, your offers, your content, your brand, all of it gets stronger when it's built around a clearly told story, not just a list of services. That's what I was telling you guys with our candle company. We built everything around our story. We stopped talking about all the stuff the candle does. We do secondary, but we spend more time talking about how the candle was a great tool for us and how we as a couple changed. I'm telling you, start telling the story of why you started your business. What prompted you to do that? And watch what people flock to you. You're probably getting customers already. You can't help though. Can't hurt though. Put it like that. Your gift makes room for you. So like this is one of my favorite parts. Proverbs 18:16. Your gifts and the gifts you didn't ask for. Here's to me the thing that I think most people don't understand. Many people don't see themselves as gifted, right? They don't see themselves as being able to sing and dance and do all those other things that we consider to be gifts. But everybody has a gift because everybody has a story. Let's talk about it. A man gifts will make room for them and bring them before great men. This is what Proverbs said. We normally think, that's what I just said. We normally think of our gifts and talents, singing, speaking, leading, all those different things. But your story is as much as a gift as any of these things, not just the highlight reels it's just not highlights for you. All right. I want you to see three types of gifts that you may have. There's the skill gift, the gift where you naturally are good at leadership or organizing or teaching. There's the scar gift where you survive the divorce, the deployment, the diagnosis, the financial collapse. That's the hard or painful gift. And then there's the story gift. Your ability to make meaning of, two of these, like the first one, the first three make this is where you have the ability to make meaning out of the skill gift or the scar gift and hand it to someone else as a roadmap. All right. That's a gift. It is a gift to be able to turn a gift into a gift. All right. So I'll give you an example. That's what I'm doing. I use the story gift. Here I have some gift of leading, some gift of teaching, some gift of speaking. And I use those gifts to talk about my scar gift, my divorce. I talk about deployments. I talk about financial ruin. I talk about how I made some terrible mistakes in leadership. And I turn this into a story gift. And I use that gift as the platform that I build my business around. So I'm telling you, you can do the same thing. All right. Everybody has a skill gift. You can turn that into a story gift. And everybody has a scar gift. That's a gift as well, if you can see it that way. Now, the challenge is for you to be able to see your scar as a gift, for you to see the blessing in it. The Bible says all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. It all works out for you. Even that painful thing, even that ugly thing, you can turn it into a business or a movement. I always go the wrong direction. All right. What if the hardest season was a gift for you? I remember feeling most of this stuff. All right. So this was kind of personal for me. How it felt then while you're going through it. Why is this happening to me? Like just your brain trying to find a logical reason for understanding why you're dealing with this. This is just something I have to survive, minimizing what you're going through. And sometimes within the moment, you have to do that to survive. This part of my story is something to hide. And I know it can be embarrassing. I know it can be crazy, but Paul talked about boasting his infirmities, talking about his weakness. God showed his goodness. God showed his strength. All right. So if you're only coming from positions of strength, it's hard for people to connect with you. This set me back from where I should be. I've had everything here I've said to myself before. What I need you to understand is none of it is true. Here's the thing that you need to be saying to yourself. We talked about early reframing your story. Here's some reframes that you need to adopt for yourself. This is happening for me. It's preparation. Now, what I try to say constantly is it didn't happen to me, it happened for me. It didn't happen to me, it happened for me. And because I can see life like that, now when the worst days happen, it doesn't stay a bad day. It might be a bad moment, and I'm stealing this from Doc Rock. It might be a bad moment, it might be a bad minute, it might be a bad second, but it's not a bad day. All right. So if you refuse to allow all the situation around it to be bad, then you now control or you now have the ability to shape that moment. Okay. This is the only control that you have of your thoughts. Okay. What I survived is now something I can understand at the deepest, at depth that most people don't know. Okay. What you survived is now, you heard people talk about it from a distance, or you might have seen other things, it might have been a part of movies or stories or something that you've heard before, but now you understand it differently. Okay. I understand the pain of divorce differently when somebody else talks about it. You know what I'm saying? And I also understand now what it's like to have a natural child. That's a little different. I love my stepkids to death. And I didn't think I was having any other kids. So that was the only way I understood how to love them. But it was different when I had my firstborn. And when people were saying that before, I never got it. Now I do. So there's an example. This part of my story is exactly what makes someone else feel seen. All right. People now feel like, it's not just me. Okay. And when they feel that way, the next thing they ask is, how do I get past this? This is the foundation, not just a setback. If you can see it that way, you're going to find a way to profit and even benefit from whatever it is you went through, just like Joseph, Job, or Paul. Keep going the wrong direction. All right. Real quick, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, how these are the raw materials of every chapter of your life. It's inventory for your business and the message that you're trying to build. There's three categories. We just talked about it: good, the bad, and the ugly, right? The good, the wins, the breakthroughs, the milestones, proof that things are possible, proof that you are great, you are dope, you are cool, proof that builds credibility and shows the distinction. All right. your retirement, your business launches, your certifications. Those things are good. Hold on to them. But then there's something else. These are the bad. These are the mistakes that you've made. These are the setbacks. These are the wrong turns. These are the bad choices that you might have made. But when you share these types of stories, you're going to build relatability and trust. The strategy that didn't work, the season you got it wrong, these would make you human and teach by contrast. So every time I share these stories, I know that I'm breaking through with a crowd that I'm talking to or within a workshop because the workshop gets quiet. So it's like, yeah, I'm heading home. If they're talkative, if they're giddy, like, yeah, maybe I need to try something different. But when I'm sharing my mistakes or something like that, and people get quiet, or certain people get quiet, yeah, I know I'm ringing a bell. Again, because people connect with that because they've been through it too. The ugly, trauma, shape the unspoken chapters. So, hey, by the way, guys, if you all are hearing a chime in the background, there's a storm coming through, and it's our alarm system letting us know that there's a storm. So hopefully I can finish this up. But I just wanted to let you know about that. So the trauma, that shame, I'm sorry, the ugliest trauma, the shame, the unspoken chapters build the deepest connections. The hardest things to say out loud are often exactly what someone else needs to hear that they're not alone in. Like, oh my gosh, I can't tell you some of the stories that I have that are so embarrassing because I jacked it up so bad. But after I'm done, after I've made a post about it, after I've talked about it on stage or somewhere else or made videos about it, in my comments, when I get, oh my God, you didn't know how much I needed to hear that. Oh my God, you were talking to me today. Or after I come off stage and somebody goes in tears, I needed to hear that. I didn't know how I was going to get past it. I just went through such and such and I didn't want to tell anybody, but you spoke exactly to me. Those are the moments you're going for. Those are the things that you're looking for when you're sharing things like this, because when you were going through it, you might have felt alone, but a person not feeling alone gives them like a helping hand almost, or almost imagine a person's in a pit and that pit that the person is in like feels lonely because they can't see up and nobody else is in the pit with them. You sharing your story is like lowering a ladder down into that pit. They have a way out and they know that they're not doing this by themselves and they're not stuck by themselves. All right. How a life experience become a business asset. Now, I want you to listen to this part. This is very important. The experience, what happened, the deployment, the layoff, the diagnosis, whatever it is that happened to you, that experience turns into a lesson. The lesson is what it taught you about yourself, about resilience, about how you process, about your principle. There was something that you learned from it. That's the first thing that you grasp and hang on to. The next thing is now how you frame it. All right. How'd you guide yourself through the same thing step by step in your own words? Or how would you guide someone else through the same thing? All right. So this is what we did. This is what my wife and I did with our candle company. So initially we was talking about, hey, it smells good, it's good for you. It's great to light up a room. Then we started talking about how what we did was struggle to find time for one another. And then we started lighting a candle to let the other one know, hey, shut down everything. I want time with you. Once we start doing that, um, what we start to recognize was that people start gravitating toward that because that's their experience as well. And so as we were just sharing candles, we realized we were guiding couples through those moments, finding time for each other, making meaningful present time for each other. That's something that you can do. Then because of that, we started making offers. There's a course. I have a course based on this, a talk, a coaching program, content, physical products. You can build all kinds of things around your story. Once you have the framework, you can make an offer. All right. And an offer is just whatever your product is. This is the exact process behind stories that sell. And it's where we start in the signature blueprints. All right. We're going to talk about the signature story blueprint. Now, stories to sell is my course. We'll talk about that later at a different time. And here's what I want you to understand, that signature story blueprint is how I teach a person to go from their experience to that framework and an offer. Let's go back to that. So you're going to build a foundation with your signature story blueprint. If everything you build sits on your story, Let's make the foundation one that we lay right. All right. So the signature story blueprint is a guided process to find, frame, and share your story, the one that's behind the foundation of your brand, your business, and your message. So we start with finding it first. We're going to identify the experiences that you have had that have shaped who you are, whether they're good, bad, or ugly. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to frame it. I'm going to show you how to take that story and turn it into a framework of something that is positive and that's obvious for your audience. Okay. When I say positive, we're going to talk about how, depending on who your audience is, how you shape it and aim it toward that person. We're also going to talk about how you share it. We're going to talk about turning your frame story into content, talks, offers, businesses, books, all those different things. The foundation of everything, from a single post to a full course to books to speeches to all of those things. That's what you get in the signature story blueprint. Keep going the wrong way. So, who is this for, right? What are you going to walk away with? This is built for veterans. And the reason I built it for veterans, again, because that's who I am. I'm a veteran. I've worked with a lot of veterans and I love veterans. It's built for entrepreneurs, leaders, and creators. Okay. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a leader, and I'm a creator. So I talk about things that I've experienced. So this is for you, right? This is how you know this is for you. You know, your life experience could fuel a message or a business, but you don't know how to organize it. I teach you how to organize it. You survive something significant: military service, business failures, personal loss, and since that it's meant for more than just a private memory. You've been through something and you want to use it. You're building content, but it feels like it's scattered. It might fall flat. You might not necessarily be talking to the right crowd. It's disconnected. You're not getting what you need. And I'm not necessarily talking about likes and follows. All right. Been there. This works for you too. If you're unclear, or if you want a clear foundation before you build your course, your offer, your talk, your product, any of those things, I'm the guy, because I've been through the pain of failing at those things and then learning what it took and turn around succeeding with them. You'll walk away with a clear identity of your signature story, the experience that anchors your brand, a framework that's for telling your story, and it's going to build trust. It's going to build your humanity, and it's going to also help you find the core values of whatever it is you want to talk about. I'm going to talk about a foundation that you can build content, talks, and offers on easily every time, being able to talk about exactly what it is that you do. And we're going to talk about clarity around the good, bad, and ugly chapters of your life to lead to some type of specific goal. All right. That's what the signature story does, because that's something that everybody needs. It's something that I needed. All right. So look, guys, there's a link in the bio. You can go to this link, but there's something more specific in the description here. And I want you to go there so you can get your signature story blueprint. Your signature story blueprint is going to have all that stuff that we was just talking about. All right. So let's go ahead and build your story. Stop sitting on it. You've been sitting on your story for a long time. You know you should have been making videos. You know you should have been talking about it on social media. You know that business is in your heart, that foundation, that organization, that movement that you want to be a part of. You know it's already there. You have all the raw material. You have the experience. You have the story. Let's help shape that. Let's stop sitting on the sidelines. Let's stop putting it in the past as something that you've been through. And now let's use it to build something. Build something wonderful. Use it as a tool, as a guide, as something to mentor with, something to lead with, something that you give somebody strength to go from where they are to where they can be, because your story has done that for you. So listen, guys, that's all from me. What I want to remind you is that the goal is always growth. Growth happens within a journey. So you have to learn to enjoy that journey. All right. With that said, guys, there's a link in the description. There's a link in the comments where you can get your signature story blueprint. I'll talk to you later. Till next week, guys.